Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf.
Hey, Happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2021, that magic moment when 2020 ended a few days ago. I know it was the day, the week, the time everybody was looking forward to. So we welcome everybody to 2021. We wish you the very, very best, lots of success. Can't say that disruption and transformation will end as many people hope. And we're going to go back to calm and orderly and kind of roll the clock back to where we were in 2019.
Clearly not.
But we will be here to guide you and help you, and we're gonna literally walk up the deep end today with Jeff Wald talking about the future of work and as his book title says, and it will surprise you what his meaning and the message behind that about the end of jobs. So it's actually a lot more positive than that. So we hope you stick with it. But Joyce, welcome back to 2021.
It's great to be back.
Yeah.
It really is. But
Yeah.
I got a liberal education on how a city, how a locale can operate to control this pandemic much better than what we're doing here in the U.S.
Yeah, and again, I can't wait to hear some of the stories and share some of that. And we hear that, one of the themes that we've been talking about. In fact, it was part of our theme on the last show, and then having a lot of the experts chime in, is what were some of the things that happened in 2021 or 2020 it was as a result of the pandemic that we should keep. We should learn from that. We should, that hopefully will be improved. And, we took for granted for years and years and years. We had the flu, and it was just taken for granted that we get sick. And it was from some very simple things. Maybe we should have been wearing masks before during the winter season when we're locked up inside and people came to work and they were sick.
Clearly that.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, people, the compensation, I mean, people had to take off work. So they came in sick. They didn't want to use their sick days for the wrong reasons, or they didn't have sick days, or they didn't want to use their vacation days, whatever it was. So very simple things: wash your hands, keep your distance, wear a mask. Maybe that will stick, and we'll all get through the winter seasons and some of the other outbreaks that we have a lot healthier. So who knows? But there's many, many other things that we'll be talking about, and we'll be talking about, especially with the future of work, remote working, working from home, well-being, a focus on well-being, taking care of people, engagement, all that stuff. So we're excited about.
I'm actually doing an interview on the 22nd in the morning on the future of health and wellness.
Oh.
I mean, I'm being interviewed at a conference.
Standing, yeah. And in fact, I just spoke this morning. I just got invited to speak. I had the dates, but I wasn't sure if they were going to have it. But it's a virtual meeting. It's actually for the India automotive components manufacturers, and keynoting next week of what technology is going to, how it's going to disrupt HR, the way we hire. Worldwide problem. Everybody thinks it's in their own backyard. It's only in our industry. It's only happening in small businesses. It's only happening in the U.S. No, it's a global problem. And
when you talk about that, please do not forget to talk about the experience element, because no amount of technology works if the people are not having a good time with it, or
we had that very conversation this morning, because I have like 25 minutes. It's an intro keynote. It's about 25 minutes, and they have like 6 bullets. And I said, okay, where do we start? We want to focus on the technology or the humanity or the humanness, and I don't know how we separate them, but I'll emphasize one slightly over the other, but they work hand in hand. But I really want to get Jeff on.
Yes,
Jeff. I think, I don't know if it was Jeff or his publicist approached me a few months ago the title of the book captured my attention. The end of jobs. We keep hearing about that, and there will be an end to some jobs, some job titles, some careers. But fascinating. It doesn't mean that it's the end of work. And one of the other things that captured my attention, I got to put my glasses on here.
Jeff is actually also working on the Future of Work Prize.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about that.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
I want to hear all about that.
Yeah, hopefully both of us, or you and I, are around, because it won't be distributed. It won't be rewarded until 2040. So these are the predictions for 2040. So
20 short years from now.
$1 million out there. So anyway, Jeff had a company. He has a company. It was called Workmarket, which was he sold that, or was acquired by ADP. Many of you are familiar by ADP.
Yes.
Again, he was talking a lot about on-demand work. I was listening to his book the other day, and I found myself walking about an extra mile, because I sort of just was meandering, just to say, I'm going to listen to one more chapter. And I just kept going. Very, very fascinating, because especially with the disruptions we're hearing now with remote work and with Uber and Lyft, and people were working remotely, and what's going to happen to jobs, and people are going to just hire freelancers. And it was fascinating. He says, no, that's not the future of work. So we're going to hear it straight from Jeff. So I'd like to invite Jeff Wald, W-A-L-D, to the show. And we'll get him all synced in out from the green room. And there he is. Hey, Jeff.
Well, thank you so much, Ira and Joyce.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you both. And Ira, I think that might have been the best compliment I've ever heard about the book, is that it got you to walk the extra mile. You were so engaged.
Yep,
that is fantastic.
So, a new tagline. It's a book so talking about well-being and experience and everything else. So appreciate you being here, and especially kicking off 2021, because kind of the world of unknown unknowns. So let's start with the beginning. You have a company, Workmarket. You've been a serial entrepreneur. You have a few companies. So give a little bit of your background, and then let's dive into where you think things are headed.
Well, as you said, I have started a few companies. I started my career in finance with JP Morgan. And started a company that we built up, eventually got sold to Salesforce, which was a good exit. And then 10 years ago, we started a company called Workmarket, a platform for managing your freelancers. Raised about $70 million from SoftBank and Union Square Ventures and a few others. And as you mentioned, in 2018, we sold the company to ADP. I had a pleasure of being a part of the ADP executive team for a couple of years. But deep down, I am still an entrepreneur, and so I finished up my lockup period with them, and I remain an advisor to this great company of ADP, the world's largest HCM software company. And now I'm off thinking about what is next, but talking with people about this book that we published in June of last year.
Excellent. So let's talk about the on-demand. I mean, you talk a lot about on-demand labor. So let's just start with what that is. I think some people are familiar with it, but let's make sure we're all on the same page. But again, two things captured my attention right away was the title, The End of Jobs. And then the second thing was that on-demand labor is not the future of work.
It is not. So I love that you're starting with definitions, because there are so many lexicon issues in the world of work where people are talking past each other because they're just not talking about the same stuff. On-demand labor is any employment resource that is not a full-time or part-time employee of that company. So it could be a vendor, it could be a freelancer, it could be a temp. Those are all on-demand labor resources. You turn them on and you turn them off. Whereas your part-time employees, your full-time employees, there are obligations that you have from a regulatory standpoint in terms of onboarding and offboarding them.
And you believe that the contingent labor force is not going to be the wave of the future. Is that what I'm hearing?
100%. And Joyce, I appreciate the fact that you just used another term that we use in the on-demand world: contingent work, gig economy, a host of things.
Right.
So hard no, it is not the future of work. I will tell you this: when I started Workmarket in 2010, everybody in the world of work predicted on-demand labor is going to be 50% of the workforce by 2020. I remember thinking to myself, that's ridiculous. Like, that's not even going to remotely be true. It didn't stop me from putting it in my investor decks because, it's a great statistic and you always want that big trend to be your friend when you talk to VCs. But look, it wasn't going to be true then. The predictions now, by the way, are that on-demand labor will be 50% of the labor force by 2030. In 2010, on-demand labor was somewhere between 25 and 28% of the labor force. Very tough to actually pin down. We can spend hours talking about that.
Are we talking globally or are we talking US?
We are talking the US and the EU. They're about the same size in both.
Okay.
And so, but most of my research, I will certainly say, is very US focused. But 25 to 28% of the labor force, and 10 years later, we find it to be 27 to 30% of the labor force. So it's got about 3% market share gain over a 10-year period. Slow and steady growth, to be sure, but a transformation of the labor force, something that is going to suddenly change the way the world works? Hard no. There is no data to support it. There is no data in the world of work. There's no data in the history of work. And there's no clear path in the way companies actually engage workers. And all of those are why I wrote the book, is we want to look at those evidence bases, the history of work, the data of work, how companies actually engage workers. And when you start to look at those, you get a much better sense of how the future of work is going to unfold.
So real briefly, can we just go back, because we talk about jobs and of course most of us have only been around on the planet for X number of years, but the concept of a job, which by the way is the acronym that I always heard, was a job was just over broke. So, from an entrepreneur world, right? So if you have a job, it just means you need a paycheck. But the concept of a job is relatively new.
In the course of the human experience, it is relatively new. It's about 180 years old. It is not the way we have structured ourselves as humans. It is not the way we've structured society for millennia. It is a very new construct. What is ingrained in our DNA, if you will, is the idea that we're going to have a portfolio of work from which we're going to be able to provide for ourselves and our families. And that starts to sound like a freelancer. That's kind of deep in our DNA. Being an entrepreneur is deep in our DNA. Getting up and going and clocking in 9 to 5 for somebody else, that is a very new construct for humanity.
Yeah, and I love what you said. I just want to get the quote, but it was I just put it up there. It was the concept of one office, one manager, 9 to 5 is done.
It is dying. That is the end of jobs. When I talk about it, that is the job that is dying. Not jobs in total. We can jump into predictions on the future of work because of robots and AI. I am predicting no net job losses. Sorry, I'm just not predicting it. That is what the data tells us.
Right.
But the job that is dying is that one office, one manager, 9 to 5 job. That job has been dying for 30 years, and it is one of the many things that this horrible pandemic that we have persevered through, and God willing, we are almost done with, has accelerated.
So are you predicting, and as a futurist, I was always taught to use the word forecast. So I'll use forecasting. Are you forecasting a collapse of the hierarchical system so that it's flat systems? Is that what you're talking about, Jeff, when you say one manager? Is that what you're talking about?
Not necessarily. The organizational structure may evolve in a host of different ways because you have more distributed employees, you have more work done in a team construct. The idea of one office, meaning more remote work, more flexible work arrangements, which is really the more predominant situation. Remote work is actually a very specific definition of more than 50% of the time. It's got office infrastructure implications. It's got tax nexus implications. Flexible work arrangements are, for 2 weeks, I'm going to work from here, but then I'm back in the office, or every third week, I'm not going to be in the office. That will become predominant. So that is the one office. The one manager is the idea that you're not just getting your work every day from one manager. It's not the back and forth with one manager. You're working in more of a team construct. It might work with the marketing department. I might be working with procurement. I might work with some outside vendors. I might work with some freelancers and some temps. Those are team environments. And then 9 to 5, does anybody really think the 9 to 5 job is still there?
Jeff, I'm really having a difficult time making the leap from people who have certain skill sets
Mhm.
to what you're describing, which is that they would be able to work with lots of different departments. So they would have to have a much greater skill set in order to get that done. No?
I don't know that their hard skills would have to evolve. Their mindset has to evolve. The mindset of being engaged in change, of collaboration and things like that, that certainly has to evolve. But Joyce, what I'll say is this: no change, I mean none, that I have seen or researched, read about in the world of work happens like that. That is one of the misconceptions in the world of work that, you guys understand, but a lot of people don't. They think, oh, well, this new tech exists, all the jobs there are going to go. Hard no. That has never happened. It never will. Oh, on-demand labor, oh, it's going to grow so quickly. No. Things in the world of labor move very clearly, very slowly, very methodically. So there's no, oh my gosh, all the hierarchies change, or oh my gosh, all the skills change. It's never happened that way, and I would be hard-pressed to imagine a world in which it does happen that way. But slow, steady change that was accelerated by this horrible pandemic, absolutely.
So again, going back to the lexicon of things that are being thrown out there. This morning, I think I got 3 pitches. You want to comment on what I think the future of work was going to be, related to remote work or working from home and distributed workforce, and they throw all these into this one pool.
So they use them interchangeably?
Yeah. And again, so let's talk about this. We talk about on-demand. When we're talking about on-demand labor, we're talking about contingency, staffing, temporary staffing,
contract labor too, right?
Right. Which is different than remote work. So we can have a traditional 9 to 5 job. Working from home. I'm not sure that's the way it's evolving, since it's 24/7, it seems, for some people. But we can work from home. We could be remote. We could be distributed.
But we could still be a full-time employee.
And
100%.
not be on demand.
100%.
And I think people are confusing that. It's like, well, I don't want to, I need a job, but I don't want to work. I don't want to be remote, because the assumption is that they will be an Uber driver.
Are you telling me, Ira, that people are confused about this incredibly complex world of work and where it's going?
Maybe it's just me, So I'm really struggling.
This stuff is incredibly, incredibly complex. And I often talk about the ATM, and I talk about it in the book, and how the ATM came out and everyone said, oh my God, all the teller jobs are going to go. And when we look 25 years later, there are 20% more tellers in the United States. And I say to people when we dive into that example, is that any simple statement on the future of work belays the mass complexity that goes into labor resource planning. And so this is a very complicated area that requires complicated study, that requires a lot of thought and analysis. And once you do it, then we can make a prediction. But there are a lot of people out there that just like to talk. I will tell you this quick anecdote. I was on a panel, I was invited by a company, and one of the panelists said, I think 50% of the workforce is going to work remote when the pandemic's over. I was like, interesting. I'm sorry, let me interject here. How do you juxtapose that with the fact that only 42% of the workforce can work remotely? Because, manufacturing and transportation and entertainment and a lot of retail jobs. And he said, oh well, I didn't know that. And I said, well, shouldn't you know it though? Shouldn't you know that if you're going to open your mouth? Unfortunately, that was the CEO of the company, so I wasn't invited back to that group. But those are the kinds of things that need to be checked. You can't be making those statements. This stuff is incredibly complicated, and it requires those of us that do speak in a public setting to be thoughtful and to be data-driven, to be evidence-driven about what we're saying.
So you mentioned this earlier. Again, one of the complexities with this, and it was probably the reasons that the remote work, the working from home, even telecommuting was very slow. I mean, it's been around. In fact, I wrote a book in 1999. It was The Perfect Labor Storm, and it was about the future of work. And all I did was capture all the predictions and put them into a book from everybody said. And at that point, they were talking about the same thing: was telecommuting or they weren't calling it remote from work from home at that point, but telecommuting was just going to skyrocket. It was going to increase exponentially. And here we were 20 years later, and the pandemic, no doubt, accelerated that. But when we go back and we start looking at some of the trends, some of the things that are going to happen, what do you see? I'll go back to my question we asked a lot of people at the end of the year. What are some of the things that happened in 2020 that you see sticking around that we should keep to continue this evolution of what jobs and work are?
So it's such a great question, Ira. You think about this tech acceleration that occurred during 2020 with digital currencies, digital payment, remote work, teleconferencing, and all these other things, and how much will snap back, right? How much will we still go to the mall or still go somewhere? Or are we still going to buy everything on Amazon? We don't know yet. There isn't enough data. Here's where we have enough data. And surprising nobody, I'm going to start with history and data. Remote work or telecommuting represented 3% of the US workforce prior to the pandemic. At the height of the pandemic, it was about 40% of the US workforce. I think where we will end up is 8% post. Now, let's remember a few things. 8% is out of our natural limit of 42%, right? That is the natural limit in the US. So it's about 20% of people that can work remote. Two, that definition of remote work, that's more than 50% of the time. If you ask me who's going to have a flexible work arrangement, we're upwards of 32, 33% of the labor force. So the vast majority of those that are capable of not being in that office, those are things that I think are not only unbelievably good trends, they're very powerful, and they're very data-driven because we are starting to see them play out in terms of what the CFOs and the C-suite are saying, in terms of what workers are saying, how commuting patterns are evolving as some cities came off lockdown and then a lot go back to lockdown. But here's what we 100% know: remote workers or people with flexible work arrangements are happier, they're more engaged, they cost the company less, they cost the worker's less stressed, they stay at the company longer, they have lower attrition rates. That is what every study told us about these remote or flexible workers prior to the pandemic. So net, this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I hope it stays, and the data tells us that it's going to stay.
One of the things that I wrote about in my forecast was the value of flex time, flex space. And I believe that we're going to see people staying with employers. I mean, I did some work for the state of Colorado, and both the two women who were in the top positions in that organization for the state controller's office shared with me that they never would have stayed had they not had that flex time and flex space, that they were able to raise their families, juggle all of their different responsibilities. And those kinds of things, I think, are the kinds of things, Ira, that you were talking about that we should keep. And we should understand the value to people in having companies embrace the flex time, flex space, and other kinds of flexible work arrangements.
I was on the phone with the CHRO of one of the world's largest law firms, and I asked her, what is your silver lining on the pandemic? And she said, prior to the pandemic, in order to work at this firm, you had to come to this office, one of our global offices, and you had to come every day. And we had a lot of people, huge talent pools of people that we could not work with because they would say, well, I need a flexible work arrangement. We would say, nope. And now they are able to do that. So now the entire talent pools are opening up to this company and to those workers. And that is a wonderful thing.
Wonderful thing. Thank you for sharing that.
So
Love it.
I know one of the challenges, going forward, there's a lot of good things that are going to happen. We can talk about nexus and regulations and you mentioned it earlier, Joyce, about upskilling, learning new skills. And that's certainly one of the threats. Jeff, to you, what are some of the biggest challenges that we see here? And then I also want to leave you time to talk about your prize.
Please.
So the biggest challenge in my mind, without question, is retraining. Now, I am a firm believer that there will be no net job losses through robots and AI. But the key word there is net. There will be tremendous job losses. 10 to 15% of the US labor force, upwards of 25 million people, will be displaced over the next 20 years. And we will create more than 25 million jobs. But how do we get people from industries, from geographies, from skill sets that are declining into the areas that are growing? Because as a society, we have done an incredibly poor job of this over human history. Through each of the industrial revolutions, we did a poor job. We did a poor job in the United States with the 8 million manufacturing workers that lost their job over a 20-year period. And if we don't provide that retraining, if we don't provide that reskilling and the support necessary, we do so at our societal peril. And so that to me is the biggest challenge without question.
We're literally talking corporate suicide.
100%. Like, and societal. Look, Joyce, these are times when you look at the history of huge technological innovations, huge job loss, and then eventually huge job gain. You look at that history in that trough period where workers are left behind, and you see literally blood in the streets. This is time of mass social upheaval. This is time of revolution. This is not a pretty picture for societal stability, and we owe it to the workers to make sure that we are providing them with the services they need to get into the jobs that are growing. And the services are there, and there's massive changes in technology, VR training that is mind-blowing, just mind-blowing in terms of what can be done.
Yes,
and I'm going to encourage everybody to definitely pick up Jeff's book. It'll be good for exercise, because if you listen or no, you can't read it while you're walking, but if you're on your treadmill or something and you're reading or listening, you'll go an extra mile. But because the concept, we just unfortunately don't have a whole lot of time to cover it, is about that safety net. Again, we talked about jobs as relatively recent, and so is the safety net. The safety net's not even in the U.S. and in the Western world, it's not even 100 years old. And so again, all that needs to evolve, and we need to take care of people. But before you go, let's talk about this prize. I mean, it's fascinating. I think it's is it $10 million?
It is $10 million. Look, I have the honor of being an advisor to the X Prize. And so as I was writing this book, I thought through, wow, writing a book really is hard, and I'm not very good at it. And how do I make this process easier? And a very good friend of mine said, oh, you should get contributors. And so I reached out to a number of people, 20 of whom agreed. And these are the men and women that are really shaping the future of work.
Impressive list. It's an amazing list.
Heads of the largest staffing firms, heads of the largest unions, CHROs from some of the largest companies. I mean, it was such an honor that they agreed to do it. And I thought, you know what, let me ape the X Prize and put out a $10 million prize. I will only award it in 2040 because we have to see whose prediction is most correct. But I asked each one of them to write their vision of the world of work in 2040. Some are very dystopian, some are very, very optimistic, and some are right down the middle of the road. And I am super excited to, at some point in 2040, award the $10 million prize to one of the authors, which has been a great, great joy to be a part of.
Well, I'll make you a deal. Is after you're awarded, hopefully you'll come back on the show.
I will very much look forward to it. Very much. I will be here January 1st, 2040. Mark it down.
Thanks. Jeff, how can people get a hold of you? Obviously, you can go up and look for The End of Jobs. I saw that there were 2 books for The End of Jobs, but this one's by Jeff Wald.
You know, it's interesting. It is sold everywhere fine books are sold. I wish I could say go into your local bookstore, but unfortunately, that's not going to be a reality for some people for some time. But there's this company called Amazon that has it, that you can find it. And any of your listeners can always find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at Jeffrey Wald.
Thanks. Any final words, comments?
Just one of gratitude to you and Joyce for having me on the show. This was super fun conversation, and I hope everybody walks that extra mile.
It was great having you. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff. I really appreciate it, and very grateful that you took the time to join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And have a great year. I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay. So what a way to kick off the year. You've been listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, the first show of the first show of 2021, first show of the fourth season. And couldn't think of a better way to kick it off than with Jeff. Sort of gave us a million topics. My mind's racing with different ideas to go through the course of the year to explore as well. Hopefully the listeners experience that as well. We are going to take a short break as we usually do, and we're going to come back with Joyce's segment, Ahead of the Curve. Don't know what we're talking about.
We're going to talk about some of my workplace trends. We're going to continue.
Okay, we're going to continue on that. So again, thank you everyone for listening to Geek Skis or watching Geek Skeezers and Googleization. We will be right back after hearing from our sponsors. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
A lot of you might be feeling like you're standing in deep shift. But do you know what grows and rises out of deep shift? Opportunity. To successfully navigate the shift to the new normal, each of us must learn to rapidly adapt to the speed of change. Some of us are hardwired for this. Others, not so much. That's where Success Performance Solutions can help. Success Performance Solutions is now your AQ headquarters. Whether you are personally struggling with the next chapter in your career or wondering how ready your team is for fast, disruptive change, our AQ assessment and coaching will provide you a detailed, scientifically backed roadmap to guide you into the new normal. Optimize your adaptability today. Contact Success Performance Solutions about evaluating your team's change readiness or joining our upcoming AQ Masterclass. Visit successperformancesolutions.com or call us at 800-803-4303.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geek Skeezers and Googleization show. I'm Ira Wolf. I'm here with my co-host, Joyce Joya from the Herman Group. Again, we really appreciate Jeff Wald talking about the end of jobs, but not the end of work, being on the show. And hopefully you'll pick up his book. We are now in our Ahead of the Curve segment, which we started 2-3 months ago. And each time Joyce brings up a new topic or a subject. And this is a great segue and a continuation of what we were talking about, kind of sharing what her forecast from our celebrity futurist, right?
Well, Ira, as you know, at the end of every year or at the beginning of the new year, I issue something called in this case, the 2021 Workplace Forecast. And I had so much to talk about because of the pandemic and the effects and just adding that as another element. I decided to chop it up into 2 parts. And we'll see how far we can get in the time that we have today.
Absolutely. But
let's first start with the fact that the global economy is in peril. And let me explain why. And the US as well. And I am more hopeful today than I was yesterday, because I believe that there will be enough support in the US Congress to support our restaurants and our small businesses and our people so that we will not succumb to this kind of downward spiral that could happen to many countries in the world, who, by the way, will be delayed in getting the vaccine from when we are. I was blessed to do some work for an organization in the Philippines a couple of weeks ago. And when I looked at how soon they would be getting the vaccines, it won't be for another few months because they're still in negotiations with the companies. And for whatever reason, they turned down Pfizer. I don't know exactly why. Maybe they, like Donald Trump, thought that, oh, we've got so many other vaccines that are in the pipeline. We don't need to jump on this one right now. But anyway, the bottom line is that in many countries of the world, due to the fact that it will be months before vaccine rollouts, we're going to see small and medium-sized businesses not be able to survive unless they're getting support from the government. And in many countries of the world, especially the developing ones, there just aren't the resources to do that.
Joyce, let me just comment on a couple things, and this continues on what we talked about with Jeff.
Sure.
There were, despite the fact that it was really, for me, it was definitely a disruptive year, whatever side you're on, whether you thrived or you're barely surviving. But we still are functioning. I mean, the economy's down. I mean, the stock market's up, but the economy is still moving along. I just got Alan Ballou's forecast.
Yes.
They're talking about there's going to be a little bit of a dip in manufacturing this first quarter, but all the signs they see, it's going to be strong through the rest of this year into mid-year of 2022. So we're seeing even a sector that was hard hit, relatively hard hit, that will be, thriving. So that's a positive news. There were a lot of, we talk about high unemployment and disruptions and bankruptcies. There's more businesses, and we talked about this on the last show, more businesses that started than failed. Now, some of them may be on life support.
Ira, I just need to stop you. I was talking about the global economy.
Right.
You're talking about the domestic economy.
But even globally, I mean, globally, companies are struggling. But the fact is, the UK shut down again, lockdown, right?
Yeah.
They've got huge problems.
Yeah.
But they are still functioning. I mean, it's not.
They are functioning,
it's not chaos.
and their small businesses are not. Their restaurants, their local restaurants, are not able to stay open. Their hotels are all shut down. I mean, you're no question. Yes, they are still functioning. I don't dispute that at all. I need to move on.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
no, you got a lot to
on economics forever.
Right.
So we've got changing demographics that are reshaping the workforce. And I mostly focus on the US when I look at these developments in the workforce and workplace. And the US currently has 5 generations in the workforce. We have generations X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And we have baby boomers, and we have the matures who are still hanging in there, sometimes even doing manual labor, like working on loading docks or something. Mm-hmm. But they define themselves by their contribution to society and the work that they do. So they want to be there. So I have recommended to employers that they invest in their people at this time and continue to look at how they can reskill, upskill, do to make sure that the people are going to survive. And we just lost Ira, so I'm going to keep going. I've also recommended that organizations ask their frontline people what they need from them, and that will really, it'll do two things. One, it lets the employees know that the organization really cares about them, but it also helps the organization because then they know what to do. Asking people what they want is so underrated. I met one GM in Cairn. He was the GM of the Hilton in Cairn, where I stayed. I think it was on my honeymoon. So it was 11 years ago. And he every week he has 1 hour that he sets aside, and he goes to different departments and he asks them, what do you need from me? How can I support you in doing a better job? I think it's a brilliant idea. And he's had some fascinating responses from people, and he always takes action. And that has helped him to keep his employee turnover under like 5%. It's crazy.
Yeah. And again, going back to just some of the things that happened, I think not for every company, some companies struggle with it and they were just waiting for things to go back to normal. But there's a lot of companies that really transformed the way they communicated. They really understood that.
Wasn't that great though? It was
absolutely
wonderful.
We talked about that transparency and that authenticity that, again, you're sitting here and things happened and you fumble or the child runs into the room or the cat comes in or you screw, the phone rings, whatever it is. And if it's all of a sudden we acknowledge that we're all human beings, we all make mistakes, we all shared that personal side. And that is a huge positive rather than just having this cold and corporate structure. When you come in, you leave all your personal feelings behind. And from day one, I don't know, it was from day one, from every time there was a water cooler in the workplace, everybody always said the water cooler was where things got done because people let the guard down and they talked and they chatted, or the lunchroom. And then you'd go back into the more traditional settings. So again, hopefully that's one more positive that comes out of this.
Yes, I'm sure that there were conversations around the well at one time.
Yeah,
okay, absolutely. So let me keep going because I'd really like to get through part one if I can.
Good.
Some workforces have taken hits because there were 300 in the US alone, over 350,000 people have died. And many of those people were older workers who were the intellectual capital of the organization. And so those organizations are going to need to look at what do they need to do to make sure that they preserve their intellectual capital moving into the future. The number 5 was the inability of companies to recruit the needed employees that they will need in order to flourish in the years ahead. So it's going to handicap, it's the whole Ed Gordon concept of 10 million jobs open.
Well, even from what Jeff just said, I mean,
yes.
Basically there will be jobs. There will be up to 25 million jobs that the job titles will go away. There will be jobs for those people, but they will require different skills. And I've been saying this for quite a while. I think it either came from one of the studies, either the one from Oxford or World Economic Forum, that 2/3 of all jobs will be 1/3 automated. And as I say facetiously, that does not mean that everybody gets to go home at 25 hours a week because the rest will be automated. It means that for the rest of that job, you're going to have to learn new skills. We're going to have to learn how to work cooperatively and collaboratively with technology. There will be good jobs out there, but it requires a new skill set.
Right. Or maybe what Jeff was talking about, maybe just a different, maybe just more of an openness to taking your skills and applying them in a slightly different way.
Adaptability.
That's what he answered me when I said, don't they need additional skills in order to work in different areas of the organization? Anyway, so the one of the solutions for organizations is to embrace the whole concept of career pathing,
Mhm.
so that people understand they can come in at this level, and they can grow to this level without leaving the organization. And in some cases, it's actually a hopscotch career path within the same organization. So they could come in here and they could move over here, and then we could put them here and then here. So that it doesn't have to be totally linear either.
Well, I'll take it one step further. Is the hopscotch could be with other companies. It used to be that if you leave, you're not a loyal employee. We just invested 3 years and trained you, and you left, so we're never hiring you back. Except they went to another company because there was another opportunity. They learned new things from that culture. They may learn new skills, and then they would come back with more advanced skills or different skills or a different outlook. So that pattern doesn't have to be only within an organization, but it could be. And again, there's a lot of people talking about those shared teams that
Right.
you may not have one boss. You may have multiple
Right.
bosses because, hey, your expertise is needed on this team. Now it's needed on this team. Now it's needed on this team. And those teams may be mixed teams. So,
And
yeah.
here's a radical idea, really radical idea, kind of like from one of the Christmas movies that I think it was Miracle on 34th Street, when Macy's was sending people to the other store. I can't remember the store.
It might have been Saks.
No, it wasn't. It was right across the street. And I was there in New York when it was still across the street. Gimbels. Macy's was sending people to Gimbels, and Gimbels was sending people to Macy's. And the radical idea is that companies that don't have those jobs for people to be promoted into,
Shared workforce.
exactly,
Yeah.
would cooperate and say, okay, I don't have a job for Tim. Do you? And that company would say, well, great, but can you take Jane and find her a job in your organization? So yes. And then the last one on my part one was that becoming an employer of choice. And I don't mean earning that designation, although I encourage people to look into employerofchoice.com, of course. But being the preferred employer will not be optional. Because if you want to attract that top talent, you need to be the one that they want to go to.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's funny. I'm doing a presentation for the International Business Show, and I'm doing it with a colleague. They paired us up just remotely. Both of us happen to have worked together for 20 years. And he just sent me his slides. And one of his slides are what employers will have to do for recruitment is become an employer of choice.
Oh,
so that was just definitely my piece.
He should definitely put employerofchoice.com.
We'll
www.
We'll definitely include that. So we are just about out of time here. So I know.
Okay. But I just wanted to quickly mention this week in my Herman Trend Alert, and I encourage everyone to sign up for the Herman Trend Alert at www.hermantrendalert.com. I'm going to be talking about access as the new currency. And we'll talk about that in a future edition of Ahead of the Curve. Take it away, Ira.
Excellent. Again, what a way to kick off 2021. So excited. Next week, I was looking up while you were saying a few things here. We got Derek Lunston. Derek has a company called Life Guides. In the end of the month, we have Jason Cochran, and he's got a company, I Aspire. We're going to be talking about something near and dear to your heart. We're going to be talking about well-being, how do we get those employees engaged? What can we do to improve the employee experience? So Joyce, you'll be in your heyday those times. But we want to thank everybody. Yeah, thank you for coming back and listening. I know we had a lot of people. We had a little activity on LinkedIn. We had people say, "Oh, I can't make it live, but we'll be sure to listen to the replay." Again, thank you very much for helping us kick off 2021. And we wish you lots of success. You've been listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show. I'm Ira Wolf, your host. I'm here with Joyce Joya, my co-host. Make sure that you sign up for Googlization Nation, and you will get updates about this show, other shows, webinars, other events that we're going to have, and the HermanTrendAlert.com, so you can get Joyce's newsletter, and anything you miss or we don't cover here, you'll be able to read about. Until next week, don't let the shift hit your plans.